Welcome to the video everyone, and today this is going to be a video looking at some history with regards to shouting fire in a crowded theatre, the law surrounding that, but also how this could be used as an argument against those in authority and institutions and things like that, if you turn it around and against them. Okay, so the background of this case, which is very interesting, and I'm not sure whether I believe it to be true, whether it's propaganda to make sure that everyone went to war. There was a lot of people, a lot of deaths in that period of time. Loads of people were killed, and that was a mass genocide really against people who did not want to go to war. And I suspect that this is going to happen again. What's going on in Israel, and people will be drafted, or it could, conscription could be a possibility. And so the propaganda such as fire in a theatre could start to arise again. And we're already seeing speech laws starting to be tested. And this is something that I want to do. I want to test speech laws with my own case. I'm not sure if you know this, but I have been writing up my own court case. I did a self-represented court case. I was attacked. It's all written in my Substack. I don't really want to go massively into that on my Cafeed channel because I want to spend more time on history in that channel. But Matrix Exodus, I do talk about that court case because it's a significant moment where everything turned around for me and I started questioning everything. So it might be of interest to you if you're interested in why I started heading down the route, the pathway that I have done. Anyway, this situation, let's have a read of the background. In the 19th and 20th centuries, panics caused by false shouts of fire in crowded theatres and other venues were not uncommon. Most notably, the Canonsburg Opera House disaster led to 26 deaths, and the Italian Hall disaster saw 73 people die in a crush that ensued from a false alarm in a crowded banquet hall. The problem was widespread enough that the person falsely shouting fire became a stock character in popular writing, representing an example of foolish or villainous behaviour, which is interesting that it became a regular kind of character, because if you think about things today with our movies and our books and everything that we're handed over, there's a lot of stuff that people talk about with predictive programming, and I'm someone who believes that kind of stuff is true. I think that there is predictive programming, and I think that it can be used then to weaponize against the minds of people, and specifically the non-thinking people. And so I think that predictive programming is a very real situation, and that statement there could be applied to predictive programming in the 1900s. Just a thought, might be wrong, just a thought. Laws were enacted in some jurisdictions to protect the public from panics such as the Indianapolis Municipal Code of 1917, which made it illegal to cry out a false alarm of fire in any church, public hall, theatre, moving picture showroom, or any other building of similar or different character, while the same is occupied by assemblage. The first known analogy of a context of free speech occurred in 1918 trial, Eugene v. Debs. Debs was charged with violations of the Espionage Act for an anti-war speech he had delivered in Canton, Ohio. In his closing argument, Debs offered as his sole legal defence that his speech was protected by the First Amendment. Federal prosecutor Edwin Wirtz then argued in his closing rebuttal, now he speaks about the Constitution of the United States giving him the authority to do what he did at Canton. The Constitution provides that there shall be no abridgment of free speech, which is true. Yet it is a fact that a man in a crowded auditorium or any theatre who yells fire and there is no fire and a panic ensues and someone is trampled to death may be rightfully indicted and charged with murder and may be convicted and sent to the electric chair for making such an outcry when there is no occasion for it. That is an abridgment of a right of free speech according to the defendant's idea. According to his theory, a man could go into a crowded theatre or even to his audience and yell fire when there was no fire and the people trampled to death, and he would not be punished for it because the Constitution says he has the right to free speech. And this is a massive case. I learnt about it in my law degree. It's very significant on speech. And I don't think that the UK had any laws surrounding speech until we had the Human Rights Act, which was in the 1990s, and then that started to enforce speech. And there's this very important Somerset versus Stewart case from the 1700s in the UK, and this is all talking about positive law, which is statute law. And Lord Mansfield is talking about his disgust towards positive or statute law, but statute law preserves its force long after the reasons, occasions and time itself from whence it was created. It is so odious that nothing can be suffered to support it but positive law. So slavery is odious, but the only thing that would support such an odious, cruel act is statute law, which in effect is what we have today. So we have the Human Rights Act in the UK, and that prevents people like immigrants coming, when they've come over, it would be classed as racism to deport them, even if they're here for slave labour. And we've never had slave labour. And even in 1772, we didn't have, we would not allow slaves upon our shores, but we've got them now because of the statute laws which protect the mass importation of migrants who then get lost into the system. They're encouraged to throw away their documents and they're stuck here. They're stuck in the United Kingdom. They become slaves, and then because they're working for such low wages, that affects the British people as well. So, you know, this is I don't know what I think about the US Constitution either. I know that there's a lot of Americans who love it, and I just don't know that I do. I can understand why you do, but I think there's deeper problems, and that's what my issue is with the Constitution. And perhaps it's not considered from the fact that you've got those written laws. And I think that we shouldn't have any written laws at all, basically, is what I'm thinking. I guess I'm quite extreme. And that's probably why I'm not a lawyer after qualifying in law, because, I love law in the fact of like the law that comes from the Bible, but I don't like, and the Ten Commandments, I suppose, but I don't like in any greater detail than that, really. So this is all about the First Amendment, which has been written into US law and Constitution. And it's saying that people should be able to be put into the electric chair for making the outcry if people were trampled. Now, in the UK, we had the Hillsborough disaster, where people were trampled in a football ground. And there's a lot of theories, and I think actually it's come out that there was intention behind it. There's a second coroner's, the independent the blame was on the hooligans, on public disorder. But actually, when you look into it, the issue is more to do with the policing surrounding it, and how they actually ensured that these people were crushed to death by the way of their handling. And so this is why this Hillsborough disaster is why I'm also concerned about what was written here with regards to crying fire in a theatre. And you can see that it was used to get people into war and drafted. And you can see here that it, with the Hillsborough disaster, that it was just failure on the police. And it could have even been purposefully done so as to bring in more laws, probably to get ID checks and all sorts of things like that in the future. These things are done purposefully for their own preferences and narratives, so that people, the population, act in the way that they want them to. This is nudging units. So again, talking about fire, the use of language which has which they're claiming has a negative effect on the population or people in certain situations. I now want to consider speech by those in authority and institutions. So this is something that I'm looking at, and it might be a case which I start to bring against police in the UK. Again, just to explain, my own situation is that I was attacked, and I was attacked by an illegal immigrant, and the police saw that he was attacking me, and then they sped off when I screamed for help, and then the attack got much worse, and further assault was taking place against me. And the police are leaving people like me in those situations because they're afraid of being called racists. And if they get called a racist, will they lose their jobs? Will the police force get sued for racism? So they'd prefer not to deal with the situation, which ends up causing greater harm to the native population. And I've talked about how these repeat patterns keep happening in our history. I talked about, I think it was 1275 laws or something like that. So police officers are told not to say black sheep or blacklisted. I know that in my son's schools they weren't allowed to say blackboards, but they were allowed to say whiteboards, which I made a complaint about because I thought that was just tedious. And I think that was reversed in the end, because you've got to make these complaints or otherwise they'll just keep at it. So you've got to come back at them and you've got to say to them, no, I'm not going to accept that behaviour. You're being pathetic. Grow up. So they've been told that they can't do that. But then there was a 9-page document about diversity guide for staff. Now, I've written a complaint to Cheshire Police, and that's on my CAFeed. This is on my CAFeed, so you can go and read that if you want. And this is about Cheshire Police were saying that they'd imprisoned some people for their speech, and within that speech I think they'd said some abusive racial words which they had not explained on their Twitter, because they were bragging about it on Twitter. And so I decided that I would write to them and make a complaint to them about their brags. In this top bit, I'm talking about the definition of I'm talking about their responsibility as police. They have to undergo the police Peel principle number 5. So the Peel principle is policing by consent. The public have to consent to their policing of them. And number 5 says to seek and preserve public favour, not by pandering to public opinion, which would include ideology, including Marxism, but by constantly demonstrating absolute impartial service to the law. I think I say in here, but oh yeah. As a victim of politically correct enabled sexual assault, I understand the fear victims have of law enforcement. Politically correct language by the police deters victims from reporting crimes. I was afraid to report the crime to the police for 3 years. Furthermore, I was compelled to represent myself in my own rape case during my CICA claim. This was as a result of a time constraint imposed on compensation claims and the solicitor's no win no fee approach, which declines representation if the case is not expected to yield profits. So I was so delayed in reporting my crime to the police that whenever I went to solicitors, they kept saying, no, we're not going to represent you. And then I'd say, well, you know, you do get exceptional circumstances. So I said to them, well, this political correctness was deterring me from going to the police. And I said, you know, can you not represent me on that basis? And they all declined and said, no, we will not, and we will not represent you. So in the end, I was forced to represent my own case under those, with that argument, which I won, and I represented it on the basis that I believe that what is happening in the UK with these grooming gangs and illegal migrant stuff is what I call, and what is known as, genocidal rape. And this came about with the Rwanda genocidal rape, and probably other cases as well. Prosecutor Akayesu. So I brought that up in my claim because I absolutely fully believe that that's happening, and I won my case. I set precedent by using it. And it's something that I want to keep on doing, because I want to keep on bringing civil cases and civil action against police for using language like this, which deters victims of any crimes, politically correct crimes, I call them. In my case, that's what I referred to them as. And I'd like to bring civil cases against them, basically for disability discrimination, because obviously when you go through that, you are traumatised. So the police effectively traumatised me for their own politically correct reasons. And so now I live with trauma, which is an ongoing disability, and I want to bring civil cases against these forces on the basis of speech, so that they do not start using this kind of language to frighten victims away from reporting crimes. And I think it has a similar effect as this does. You know, crying fire in a theatre. You know, it makes people scramble. Well, this politically correct stuff frightens people from reporting crimes, so more of a crime happens. So this is how I'm sort of seeing things. I've got to work on it. It needs work, but I can foresee what I'm trying to attempt to achieve here. So this highlighted potential corruption or deficiencies in the UK legal system. Currently, I prefer the first option, being corruption, because of the enabling of mass sexual assault and the limited representation of victims like me. This is a consequence of police adhering to their ideology of political correctness, which I refer to as Marxist communism, rendering them unapproachable. The ideology encourages violence against innocent native British citizens and instills fear, preventing victims from seeking help from the police. Which again is very similar to this kind of thing. It's just from a different perspective, but it still has the same harmful effect, right? So this is what I'm looking at when these police are doing that kind of thing. And what happened was they backed out 4 days later. Well, I'm not surprised, because when I sent this letter, in this formal complaint which I sent to the police force for Cheshire, I said the ICC determined the prosecutor versus Jean-Paul Akiesu for aiding and abetting mass sexual assault by one ethnic group against another is considered genocide. Genocide or rape, it's all here. You can have a look through this, and it has all the information. I laid it out so that they understood that I think they're genociding people, the British people. And so when they're using all this language about hate speech, we'll put you in prison for hate speech, I want to go after them for it, because it prevented me from reporting my crime to the police. And now, what happened, I sent that, and then a few days later, on the 8th of October, I sent it to them. Now, they would have known that my case was live. In fact, they did respond and say, we know that your case is live, because the perpetrator has not been arrested or anything. So that means that my case is live. They responded saying, yeah, we know that your case is live. And the only reason they would have known that is by contacting all the other police forces to find out whether that's the case. Is this person for real, or are they sort of, trolling us or what? So they would have had to have checked that my case was live, and they would have found out that it was. And then what happened after I sent this was that all of the a whole load of police forces removed their Twitter. They left Twitter, and which I think is a good thing, because they're using Twitter to brag about how politically correct they are. And I'm taking notes, by the way. I'm keeping the evidence of all of this. And they're bragging about how politically correct they are, and I'm making formal complaints against them, saying that they are committing genocide or rape. But I wanted to look at it from this perspective. What if they say, we're going to do this, we're going to start doing all this politically correct diversity, nonsense guidelines, and then a few days later they back down? Because I think this was done, the first time it was done was 26th of January, and then they back out on 4 days later. Now, I don't know whether they are talking between each other, the police forces, saying, oh yeah, there's people who are making claims that if this is genocide or rape, you better back down. I don't know whether that's happening. I hope it is. And I hope that's why they're backing down, because I would bring civil cases against these people. But I'm looking at it from this perspective. Can I bring a legal argument against them based on these court cases from America? Now, I can use their case law. Absolutely, I can. And it would be very interesting. But I've got to work on this kind of argument. It's fluffy in my head at the moment, but it needs solidifying, if you know what I mean. I need to write on it. I need to work on it. But I think it's something that is very interesting from a legal argument. I think it's quite clever, because if they're going to be using all these laws, and they've used case law to prevent us from speaking, basically, to use against the constitutional rights in America. Well, if I brought this case against these police, that would have such a significant effect on these cases, which slam down speech. Because this is claiming that individuals are the issue, whereas I'm claiming institutions are the issue. So it's something that I want to go after. And if you see anything like this, please send it to me. Just, put it in, you don't have to, you can put it in the comments or something like that. Or in my community bit on YouTube. Just send these, because I want to go after them. And so I'm working really hard to look at different arguments that I can use. And I won't be able to use lawyers, because they won't represent me. They always back away. So this will be self-represented as well, just like my previous cases were. If you're interested in looking at those, I think I have got them. I start to write about them a bit further down, around about November, October time. Yeah. September, October, November. So if you're interested in how I did it, I used Marxism against Marxism, basically. My disability, now that I've got trauma, I used that against them. I said, if you're going to use special interests such as, gender or race or ethnicity, then you're going to have to market them as which is more valuable. How are you going to decide which is the more valuable asset, if you will, within these minority groups? And it's one of the things which I thought about. I spoke to someone in 2017 and I said to them that I think that they're going to start slaughtering the disabled in Western countries. And the reason why I thought that they were going to do that is because they can't have, with Marxism, they can't have white minority groups. They can't have that in your own country because that doesn't work for Marxism. So they need to start slaughtering the disabled people. And I said that around about 2016, 17. Yeah, that happened and it's still happening. So I'm going to do a deeper look into this because I'm going to do this in my CAF feed, and I'm going to be uploading all of my case onto my Substack. I'll try and do it on my blog, my website, but I'm a bit poo when it comes to doing websites, if I'm honest. I'm not very good. You can go and check and double check on that. I'm so poo at technology, so I'll stick to Substack because it's a little bit easier for me, and I'll be uploading my court case on there. I just need to redact some personal information from the sheets, but yeah, that'll be going up soon. And you'll see how I did it. I did a lot of handwritten stuff in there, and I did tell them that I thought that it was this. And they did believe that I genuinely believe it to be that, which I do. I mean, they even talk about there mass rape and gang rapes, and that's going on in the UK, right? So we're already in war in the UK. It's just that it's, meant to be a civilized country, and everyone thinks that it couldn't possibly be happening here, even while it's happening here. So another reason why I want to bring these cases is because I don't want this discussion silenced. And it is being silenced by the media and by the police and by the authorities. So if I want to have this discussion, which I do, then I'm going to have to bring the civil cases against them, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so I just thought that I'd talk about this not briefly, it's been 30 minutes or so. So I wanted to put to you whether you think that these are good arguments, and whether you can understand what I'm trying to attempt to do here. And then I think I'll leave it at that. I will come back to this because I think this is interesting. I think this is propaganda, and this is the thing, it doesn't even matter whether it's propaganda. It's put to us as truth, right? Or false flags. Propaganda and false flags. And it doesn't matter if it's propaganda and false flags. If it's being put to us as truth and it's been accepted even by the courts, then I'm going to use it, and I'm going to use it against whoever I want to use it against, even when they back down. Because even if they back down, it still affects the victims because you've said it in the first place. So that's where I'm at. I am actually going to still do the video for CAF feed for the walls and the dikes, so I'll get on to that. Thanks for listening all the way through. I'm not sure if any of that made sense. It's a bit off the cuff, but I just wanted to get through it quickly. Okay, bye.